the background to that?
I think it was about
Morocco?
violence and non-violence in the region, in the Arab world.
Yes, yes.
So
Well, go ahead.
We'll begin with that, and also, if you want, I can speak a little bit about the uprising in the Arab world since 2011.
That would be great.
So, for me, I mean, violence is really an epidemic in our region. And I am speaking not like a world citizen, but as an Arab, if you want, as an Arab who is speaking to do some autocritic, self-critic. So violence in my region is not only a fact, but it's also a value. It means that our society in general think that when there is an injustice, it is legitimate to use violence to put an end to the injustice. I don't know if you hear me. Yes? Okay. I can't hear you, but... Okay, so I will continue. I can continue?
No.
Okay.
Matzi, I have a technical problem, so I turn off my microphone to hear you better.
Okay.
But I can hear you, yes. And pull your screen down so I see your mouth.
Okay.
Yes, better. Okay.
So I can continue.
Yes, continue, please.
So for me, this violence, as I told you, is not only a fact, a historical fact that we can see every day, but also a value. And this, I mean, globally, it has some causes. As a historian, I think there is three main causes of this violence in our region. The first cause that the Arabo-Islamic civilization is historically, I mean chronologically, is the closest civilizational space, historical space to the Western world that was symbolized for a long time by Europe. It means that historically, the Arab civilization, I mean the great Arab civilization, is chronologically just the one before the, how to say, the flourishing of the Western civilization in Europe and then in America and Australia. This allows us, unfortunately, to compare our state with the state of Europe and the West. Because in our memory, the memory and the souvenir, if you want, the memory of glory, of power, of civilizational development, it's still alive in our minds. And because of that, the Arabs don't accept, if you want, psychologically speaking, the Europe and the Occidental domination. Even the moral domination. For example, they are democratic, they respect the rights of their people. I mean, at least more than the Arab world. And also the material domination, the cultural domination. We are obliged to use the European languages to express ourselves to the world, etc., etc. So this is on the historical and chronological level. But also, and this also is unfortunate, that we are the civilizational space the closest geographically to the West, symbolized for 2 or 3 centuries by Europe. And this double, how to say neighboring, voisinage, this double neighboring allow us to compare also our situation with the situation with Europe, and also it allowed Europe to begin with the Arab world to dominate the region. And all that, I mean, has created a big frustration. I mean, a sentiment of injustice. And also there is true injustice, I mean, and this true injustice is the colonial and neo-colonial domination, Occidental domination. And the problem in the Arab world that when the direct colonization stopped during the 40s and 50s, we got this problem, the Israeli-Palestinian problem. And for the Arab world, it's a colonial problem because there was a people that is the Palestinian people, an Arab, Christian and Muslim people, and another people came from outside to dominate it and to colonize it. At least it's the way the Arabs saw the problem. And so this frustration and this sentiment of injustice continued until today and created a lot of violence in the minds of the people of the regions. Thank you.
Wow. I really like that analysis. That makes so much sense. And I'd never really thought about it that way before. How specifically I mean, definitely I can see how this gives rise to acute resentment and awareness of colonial and colonial oppression and Western domination and so on. Can you say more perhaps about how this specifically results in violence as opposed to, say, mass protest or, other forms of resistance that are not directly violent?
But I mean, hopefully this situation of resentment and of violence in the minds of the people is weakening. It started to be weaker than 20 years ago. I think it's because of the youth, of also that the situation also of the Arab world is much better in the world politics, if you want, than 50 years ago or 60 years ago when the Arab world was directly dominated by the West. And also because of the globalization and that we are getting more and more views from the world. I mean, just through universities, through the media, etc. And so the youth are much less violent than their parents, and the parents are much less violent than their grandparents. And we could see that in the Arab uprisings, because mainly, and I can say 95% of the situation in the Arab world that has new, I mean, the Arab Spring protests, these protests were non-violent and, if you want, ideologically pacifist. The youth who launched the movement were, I mean, convinced of pacifism. And this is, for me, it was really a good news for me personally as historian and as pro-democracy activists. But the problem that the regimes who are, if you want, ruled by their parents and grandparents, because do you know, in general we have had a gerontocracy. For example, Mubarak was 83-year-old, Ben Ali was 76-year-old, etc., etc. But also because they are dictatorial or authoritarian regimes, used violence against the pacific protesters, and this was very bad for the development in the region. And because of the use of violence by the regimes, the majority of these protests ended up in violence, and also they could not realize, they could not, how to say, implement their agenda of constructing, of building new regimes, democratic regimes, except of Tunisia. I mean, the only exception is Tunisia. And I can tell you that the Tunisian case was known as exceptional even before the Arab Spring, because the society of Tunisia is the most modern Arab society with the Lebanese society. The Lebanese society and the Tunisian society is the most modern. And also it was the first Arab country to get a modern constitution as early as 1861. And also the Tunisians consider, I can just one sentence more?
More.
The Tunisians also consider that the democracy is not a Western idea. For them, it is a Tunisian idea, because this first modern constitution was established in 1861. It means about 20 years before the coming of the French, the colonists. And in 1863, the French Marines, the French army, intervened to put an end to the pro-democratic attempt in Tunisia. And this made it easy for the Tunisian people to consider that democracy is also a Tunisian idea, and even that the colonial powers intervened against the first, how to say, the first attempt to build a Tunisian democracy. The second thing, that Tunisia was the first Maghrebi state to establish new schools, I mean modern schools, with foreign languages, for example, Turkish, Italian, French, were taught in Tunisia since 1840s. If I compare with Morocco, we had to wait until 1920 to get the first modern schools, and they were French schools. It means colonial schools. So the Moroccan people, for example, until today, I mean a majority of the Moroccan people, how to say, we can say confuse democracy and Western culture, because it was modernization, and the modernity was imported and imposed by violence to the Moroccan people. This is not the situation of the Tunisian people. And this situation gave the first, modern constitution in the Arab world in Tunisia. And also it was the only success story in the Arab Spring. Thank you.
Wow. You know, I've just been reading this morning on the subject of and shame at the basic cause of violence. The pieces are Dropbox by the prison psychiatrist Gilligan. And he opens his article with a description of a prisoner who physically attacked the guard whenever he could. And they punished him in every way they could. They put him in solitary confinement. They beat him. They took away every privilege. There was nothing more that they could do. And so the psychiatrist got to interview him and asked him why he was willing to risk his life or to give up his life to keep attacking them. And he said one word: dignity, pride, self-respect. And this, according to Gilligan, who uses examples from psychiatry, but also from sociology and history, that humiliation, being disrespected, dissed, they say on the street in the United States, is the violence in someone else and is the underlying cause of violence. Because it seems that insult, disrespect, not being, are mortal blows to self-esteem, are a kind of death, mortified, mort meaning death, right? When they feel humiliated, mortified. And so humiliation is really the same act, worse than death, because humiliation, you walk around with it and it builds up and it builds up. And one of the things that you were saying that this could explain is the suicide bombers are young people who have grown up carrying this idea, explaining of the shame, of the humiliation, of the degradation of Arab people and Islam. They identify with that. By killing themselves and killing others, they disperse this and they see this as positive. And Gilligan, the psychiatrist, says that when dangerous criminals talk about their dreams, it would be to have a gun and go and shoot everybody and then be shot down. You know, to give up their life in a battle as long as they humiliated and violated the people that they feel they are being humiliated by. To hear you say, and I agree, that the newest generation of Arab young people have more democratic and more nonviolent ways of expressing. Perhaps one of the reasons is that they're revolting leaders, other Arabs, the dictators. Now, it's true these dictators are always supported by the Westerners, or not always, but most of the time. And but it's a struggle within inside of the culture, which is different than the suicide bombers. And he compares the bombers also to the Japanese, whose culture, when it was discussed by anthropologists and psychiatrists and psychologists and so on, is classified as a shame culture. That is to say that it's a warrior culture in which self-respect and honor are the dominant values, and more dominant than the love of life, because of the aristocratic or samurai tradition of killing themselves to prove their superiority to whoever it was that defeated them or humiliated them. So that's an interesting view of Arab youth, the humiliated who walk around with a feeling of death inside of them, death of their pride, of their self, and whose violent reaction is stronger than their will to live. And I see Alexei has just joined us. Hello, Alexei. He doesn't hear me. Alexei, you hear me?
Hello, hello, comrades.
Ah, good, 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 good. Welcome.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
I can.
yes, Alexei, we can hear you.
Okay.
Oh, and Sam.
Sam is back.
Okay, hello, friend.
So let's get back to Matti if he's still online. Matti, are you still there?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'd like you to comment on these two different ways of looking at the youth in the Arab world.
I can't hear you very well.
So, yeah.
What's your question?
Richard,
Yes.
can you repeat your
Yes, I just wondered what your comment was about what Gilligan, the psychiatrist, has said about shame being the most painful of emotions and the one that provokes violence.
And Richard was also drawing a contrast or a dichotomy between maybe a slightly older generation of Arab youth who were inclined to engage in suicide bombing as compared to the generation or the group of youth that emerged in the Arab Spring and were more committed to nonviolence and pacifism. Was one a reaction to the other, or is it more complicated?
I didn't hear the whole question.
The question is, Richard, why don't you say one more time what your question is?
Well, just what you thought about this analysis of shame as violence and the reasons why some Arab youth are terrorist and religious because of their feeling of group humiliation, where others who have democratic feelings are expressing themselves non-violently.
So yes, I mean, a part of the new generation, not the totality of the new generation, is thinking, and among mainly the intellectuals, are thinking that the only way to put an end to the resentment, to the feeling of humiliation, is to build free and democratic societies. For them, it's the only way to prove that the Arabs can be as, if you want, democratic as the Western societies, and even it is democracy who can help the Arabs to become more influential in the world, to defend their rights, to defend the rights of the Palestinian people, to free the women, etc., etc. It means for them, the new bomb is not, if you want, the suicide bomb, but to build democracy and freedom, to show that we are as capable, as civilized as the others, and not to use violence to kill the humiliation and the humiliated, if you want.
Yes. Yes. My guess is that those Egyptians and Tunisians and our movement of February 20th in Morocco.
I can't hear you.
Are young people these young people.
It's how to say? It's cut. Your speaking is cut and coming and going and coming.
Aye. Well, I don't know what to do.
Richard, I think
also I have only 5 minutes and
Okay,
have
well,
engagement. So I will continue to hear you, to hear your discussion, and if I can, I will intervene. But I have to leave in 5 minutes.
or let me ask one question. How
Yes.
does the fighting between Arab fit into this? The disunity of the Arab world and all the wars between not only Shiites and all over the world.
Richard, can you hear me? Okay, you have a bandwidth problem where you are, I think. So I suggest that you type your questions and comments into the chat window, and I will translate to the audio for you. Agreed? Okay, so let's quickly get a question from Richard here that I can repeat for Mati's benefit.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So the question Richard wants to ask is, how do we explain disunity and violence between different Arab nations and between different religious cultural formations in the Arab world? That is, between Sunnis and Shiites, or between the different communities in Lebanon, or between, you get the idea. How, aside from the underlying conflict between the advanced so-called West and the Arab civilization, what about violence that occurs inside the Arab social formations?
I think my first intervention was about that. That is, for a long time, I mean, violence has been considered in the Arab world as a legitimate way to, to defend its rights, and also to put an end to an unjust situation. And for them, I mean, they are just saying that the West also is using violence against us. It has used violence against us, and just it is a propaganda to say that the Western societies are more pacific and are more non-violent. And so violence is, just as I told in my first intervention, is not only a fact, a political fact that exists every day, but it is also a value. I mean, people, for example, people are very proud of being physically strong, of being, for example, not sleeping more than 3 or 4 hours a day. They are very proud of that, etc., etc. And because of that, women have a less good status, social status than men. And also women are playing a much less, much less influential role in society than men. So it's about virility, it's about physical strongness, etc., etc. But the situation is little by little is being, evolving to a much more pacific and non-violent mentality in the Arab world. Mainly in the most modernized.
Fred, would you read my little note, my group chat?
Yeah, sure. I did. All I see is, how do you explain disunity and violence between Arab nations and sects? I already posed that question to Mati.
Wait a minute.
We seem to have lost Mati also. Oh, here we go. Could we say, Mati, could we say that rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran, for example, is based on defending honor and pride, or countering a feeling of humiliation by one's rivals? Is it that psychological? We seem to have lost Mati here. His picture is frozen and we're not hearing from him. He did say he had to leave, so maybe he has left.
Bye. So, and Jenny has not appeared, so no one is chairing this meeting, correct?
Say what?
Jenny has not appeared.
No.
So who is chairing? Maybe you should, since I'm inaudible.
Okay, well, David had his hand up, so let me put him on.
Yeah, I wanted to first answer Fred's question about Saudi Arabia and Iran. I think we have to look at the political alignment in the Middle East and how Saudis are part of the U.S. imperial axis, and also the history of Iran. We all know about the CIA coup in 1953 and so on. So, yes, perhaps these psychological issues are also overlaid on it. I think, but what I wanted to say is I think we should recognize the most successful nonviolent movement coming out of the Arab world is the BDS movement out of the Palestinian civil society. This is a powerful movement. It's growing. It's growing in the United States. That is boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And it came out of Palestinian civil society. Am I being heard? Yeah, okay. And I think that this movement to actually against Israeli apartheid, of course, is parallel to the movement against South African apartheid. It is a very healthy development, and nonviolent struggle which grows ever stronger, and it originated in the Arab world. So let's recognize that and let's contribute to it. And by the way, DSA passed a pro-BDS resolution at its convention. It would be unthinkable before Bernie. The old DSA was more aligned with the Socialist International, which included the Labor Party of Israel. And they broke with the Socialist International. The Green Party has long supported BDS. I'm on its international committee. I'm very proud of that fact. And so I just wanted to contribute, say that. That's it.
I agree. I posted it. Fred, why don't you take over the chair and call on people, Alexei.
Well, nobody's got their hands up, so who wants to join into this conversation? Alexei and Sam, we haven't heard from this morning. Don't want to put anybody on the spot, but we're getting a lot of dead air today.
Because I joined lately. Yeah, so you're discussing exactly the situation in Arab world now with violence, or what? What's the main subject of today's discussion?
Violence and nonviolence generally, and we started off with Mati because he was available to talk to us this morning for a change. That was good. But we can range over the entire globe here if we want. The floor is open.
I'd like to ask a question if you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead. Ask it. Speak slowly and not too loud. I think that might help.
Not too loud. Okay. Alexa.
I think speaking about violence in
Alexei, you wrote 2 or 3 years ago at the time of big demonstrations in
yes,
that revolution was back, was rising up. And since then, the regime has used violence to contain both in Russia and around the world. Can you comment? And are you still as optimistic for the future? Did you guys hear me? Did anybody understand that?
Yes, and repeat my main point from this article. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you pretty well. Speak slowly. Speak slowly.
Yes, I can repeat Okay. I can just repeat the main point from that Richard mentioned, that the revolution can stop until realizes its objective purposes and objective aims. And in this sense, and from this point of view, the Russian democratic revolution is not yet finished, and it cannot be finished until it reaches its outcome. So the situation which we had in 2011, 2012 was a revolutionary situation. And it had all dimensions described by classical texts about revolutionary situation, starting from Lenin to Lenin. And crisis on the bottom of society, crisis on the top, and so on. But not every revolutionary situation inevitably leads to revolution. And this revolutionary situation was defeated. And was defeat effective mean used by Putin, a shifting of agenda from internal problems to foreign policy problems. And exactly because of this, Putin decided to invade Ukraine and to take Crimea. This led to a short-term consolidation of society on the platform of sentimental or emotional support for these foreign policy moves. And the activity, this advanced minority of urban population and what I call the new proletariat was neutralized by this foreign policy agenda shifting. And Putin's decision to send troops to Syria and to bomb Syria and so on, this is also a part of this policy of shifting agenda. But these wars, they in broader sense, they did not produce the regime wanted. It did not result in. And now the society beginning to see that actually people were cheated, and this absolutely pointless and senseless activities abroad, they cannot and will not solve the internal problems. So I expect that the public activity will increase after this short period of patriotic delusion, which happened before, and as we know, in the First World War and the Russian-Japanese War and so on. For a short period, the regime can galvanize this chauvinistic emotions, but this could be only temporary. It could only for the short period. And because of the economic and social crisis in Russia is aggravating, and even on the level of elites of the ruling class, we see the disillusionment in Putin's policy, and the ruling elite is not happy about sanctions and so on, and the economic decline. Expect the new aggravation which could lead to of revolutionary process in Russia.
Wow, you know, I'm just curious. I was watching the Olympics last night, and I note that there are Russian athletes participating in the Olympics, but they are not allowed to bring their national flag or be officially part of a Russian delegation because of the doping scandals and so on. I'm just curious, is there any impact one way or the other among Russian public opinion over the inability of Russia to field a full-fledged Olympic team this year? I mean, the Winter Olympics has always been a very big deal in Russia, I think, and the global prestige of having, you know, gold medals and all of that. Is there any consequence, either resentment on the one hand or shame on the other, or maybe a combination of the two? Or is it even an issue? Alexei? Alexei?
No, it.
We're not hearing you, Alexei.
Yes, yes.
You were good a little while ago. But can you start over on the Olympics?
Yes. You are exactly right that this propaganda around the Sochi Olympics of 2014 was a very important part of the propaganda of the regime, that we are victorious. Yes, yes, you are completely right that the Olympics in Sochi in 2014 was a part of the propaganda, regime's propaganda, that we are so victorious, we defeat everybody, we are the first in all France sports, and so on. And after that, it happened that the victories in Sochi were, for a substantial degree, a fraud because of doping scandal. And the reaction of the government was to say that this is all the conspiracy against great Russia, which is the polar of the multipolar world and so on. And we are victims of the foreign conspiracy. But the public in Russia is becoming to understand that the fraudulent nature of even this aspect of so-called Putin's victories. The victories were fake. The sportsmen were fake. Exactly like the elections in Russia or Russian democracy is fake. And many people see the absence of flag in Korea as a shame. And for becoming more and more difficult to cheat people explaining about foreign conspiracies. People begin to understand that it's not a foreign conspiracy, it's the fault of the regime itself. And the sentiment of shame is quite widespread in Russia.
Wow, thanks. Alexei, one more thing. Richard has a question in the chat asking you to explain more about your notion of the new proletariat.
I can't hear Alexei.
Alexei, we can't hear you. We seem to have lost Alexei. Did you have anything else to say?
He's supposed to answer my question about the new proletariat.
Yeah, he is, but he hasn't yet.
By new, I mean the new kind of wage laborers in the result of the economic and productive forces development. Now we see the general tendency of declining of the rate of the classical industrial working class everywhere. And in Russia too, it's the objective tendency of the contemporary world. And but this does not mean the diminishing of the proletariat as a social category. The people who have to sell their labor power, people who don't exploit. Can't hear. Hello, can you hear me now?
Not well. It comes and goes. Sometimes you're good for a long period and then it goes away. So I don't know what's happening.
Yes, but
Okay, I'm not sure how to proceed now because several people are having audio problems. Other people have nothing to say. And maybe we should segue to talk a little bit about what we're going to do at our next session and when we're going to do it. And then if things improve, we
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
It's better probably to use Skype.
Yeah, although that could be challenging too. Let's go to Skype and see if that will if other people will. The problem is whether other people will be able to hear you once we're on Skype. I'm going to open a Skype session from my iPad and see if that. Alexei, I'm calling you on Skype.
Fred,
Yes, hello.
I just posted.
Okay.
Ah.
Okay, so here's where we're at, folks, comrades. Richard suggests that we meet again in 2 weeks. We move on to the topic of work. We begin then with Alexei's work on the new proletariat. And in the meantime, hello? Well,
Hello.
yes.
Sounds like Radiohead.
I think that may be a delay in my Skype to Alexei.
Aww.
Okay, I just muted
Nice if
Alexei.
Radiohead joined us.
Okay, we have a problem, obviously. Richard's suggesting we reconvene in 2 weeks, talk about work, move on to Alexei's paper and a bunch of other contributions that are already in the work texts Dropbox. And then either Richard will be back in Montpellier with a good connection, or he will have acquired a better connection out at Eliane's country place. Everybody pick that up, Richard?
No, that's not it.
That's
Wait.
not it. What's the problem?
No, we're leaving Google Hangouts. I found something better.
What is that?
I'll tell you later.
Okay.
Can't remember the name of it, but it works.
We will see. Everything depends on bandwidth and internet connection. So all of these services either work or they don't, depending on how much bandwidth you have. That's I think. But we'll see what we got. We'll experiment. I'm open to experiment.
Okay.
I mean, it's odd because we've been doing fine with Google Hangouts for weeks, and now today it's just terrible.
Well, see what Sam's got to say.
Sam, you got anything to say? Good morning. He's muted.
He stuck his tongue out before.
Sam, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I don't have a lot to say right now.
Obviously.
All right. So, see you next week, 2 weeks then.
Okay.
Okay, we will be sending some emails to regroup. So stick with us.
Let us continue discussing on in email the way we've been doing. That's been working.
Yeah, in fact, Alexa, if you could get us started with an email to the group about the new proletariat, that would be great. Okay, I think we're
yes,
we're done. Bye-bye.